Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Dave. Today we have a special episode. We have a man who should need no introduction to many of you. Vince is bullish. He's made a lot of Rocket Lab videos recently. I've been on his channel a few times. He does a Rocket Lab weekly, I guess you'd call it a podcast. But it is a live show, which is pretty fun, with Matt Money as well, going over the latest Rocket Lab news and hanging out with them. And I will make sure to include a link to his channel in the description down below. So if you haven't come across him yet, I do suggest checking him out. So today, what I wanted to do is just have like a super casual conversation. I actually have a beer here with me, and it's just going to be kind of like as if you were hanging out with your friends, talking about stocks and investing, and hopefully everyone watching can feel like you're just hanging out with us too, relaxing, maybe having a drink. So. Yeah, welcome to the channel, Vince. It's been a long time coming. I've been meaning to have you on for a while. So.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm also looking forward to this hangout.
Great. So for the people who aren't too familiar with you yet, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got involved in investing, and eventually Rocket Lab, and what other stocks you've invested in along the way, that kind of thing, as well as your YouTube channel and how you got going on that.
Sure. So on the investment, okay, so I am a Swedish real estate developer by profession. I have a startup. I don't know if you can call it a startup, but we started a company 10 years ago. We work with investors and we buy real estate, and we are having a pretty rough time now in the market.
Yeah.
And I started investing when I was 18, I think, in 2007 and 8. And then I kind of quit for a very long time. Oh. And I was very bullish on Apple at that time. In 2013, I was very much into my company, but I told my dad to buy Tesla stock. And I really saw...
What year was that? Sorry,
2013.
Oh, yeah. Well, if he listened to you, he would have done well. I don't know. Did he?
Yes and no. So he had money on a US broker account, and then he couldn't find his login thing. And when I told him it was before all the splits, the stock was $80. I don't know what that would be. It's probably like $2 or something with all the splits included. Yeah. And it took my mother like a few days to find this login chip. And by the time he found it, the stock was like $150. And then he was like, it's too expensive. I'm not buying. And then he forgot about his portfolio. And we talked about it the other day, that if he had bought even at that time, he would probably have, I think, $400,000.
It's crazy. Those famous last words are, it's too expensive now. Because there's been so many times where I've looked at a company, like I've been wanting to buy it. Oh no, it's gone up 10, 20% or something. Yeah, it's too expensive now. And then I never end up getting into it. Then like 5 years down the road, it's like, well, who cared about that? But yeah, for sure. Apple, I guess he would have done well in as well.
Yeah,
so.
the same. Yeah, that's also up crazy. And my biggest takeaway from this is, the long-term nature of investing. Like I've experienced it. I've seen it, when we were thinking about buying stocks, and then what happens 15 years later,
Yeah, I think, you really just have to, think long term and buy good companies for a very long time. I mean, a lot of people, it's so popular, like the day trading and stuff like that, which I think is a little unfortunate, but I can understand it can be exciting and, why some of those channels are so popular. But I think it's pretty tough. And for most people, like holding long term should be the way.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's sad with all this short-term mindedness is that people obviously want to do it because they're trying to handle a problem that they don't have enough money.
Right.
And instead of handling the root cause of why they're not having enough money, I feel like 99% of them lose all their money in the trading, and then they're in a worse position than they started. And on top of it, now they hate the stock market, which is one of the the best wealth generators. So it's really sad.
Yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about, is like I've said it before, but like, I've had friends with similar income to myself, and like the fact that I've invested and they've didn't, and I can like see the difference. It's wild what like 15 years in the stock market will do for, your entire net worth and your family and stuff like that. So yeah, I wish everyone did it.
Have you been investing for 15 years?
I'm maybe not quite 50. Well, I started quite young, and actually early on my mom kind of bought me a few funds, and I think it was a similar story to what you mentioned, which I thought was pretty cool on Twitter. You mentioned, I think you bought a few shares of Rocket Lab for your daughter, and I
Yeah.
love that because like I think it'll teach her a lot. And I had a similar thing with my mom where she would buy me, it was a mutual fund back then. I don't really do mutual funds now, but I think the principle's the same. And it would just be like tracking, oh, how's it doing? Is it up? Is it down? And like learning about interest and all this stuff. And I think it was great to do that at a young age. So I would love to do something similar one day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, luckily my daughter forgot about her Rocket Lab shares. I'm actually happy because she was so like every time when it was below the buy price, she was so pissed at me, and it's
Yeah, well, that's also a learning experience. You've got to learn to be patient and stuff like that. So yeah.
yeah, it's just funny, kids, they have their feelings on their sleeves and they're not afraid to say what they think, and and
Yeah.
then it's so funny to get this blame when she's like 1 cent down on her investment. So and now she forgot about it, so we can speak about it in 6 months or two
Yeah,
years
just
and it's
wait till
like
it's gone up a little and then be like, "Hey, look at how well you're doing," or something like that.
exactly
Yeah.
exactly.
So how did you end up getting into the YouTube side of things? I'm always curious about that. I don't, talk to too many other YouTubers out there, so.
It's really weird. It's when I was a kid, I always wanted to be in film production. I grew up in Hungary, and there was just like no way. Like there was no schools, no like there was nothing happening there, right? And then actually in 2013, I started watching YouTube videos about how you edit and how you make videos. And I actually started making some Tesla videos, but not the stock videos. It was more about like electric cars.
Okay, sure.
And that channel went from 0 to yeah 7,000 8,000 followers, like pretty
Wow.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at that time, if you did any type of video and you said like Elon Musk or you had him in the title or whatever, you were getting like tens of thousands of views. And like at that time, my real estate company was very, very in the beginning, and it needed so much attention and it was so stressy that I had zero discipline on schedule, zero schedule. Like sometimes I would create daily videos for 3 days and then no videos for 3 weeks, and then it was a complete random schedule, and I was just like, I'm never gonna make it with this schedule.
Yeah.
And I'm really pissed that I quit at that time, because that channel would probably be hundreds of thousands of
Oh yeah. I mean, if you kept going, I think a lot of it seems to just come, like, to me, it seems to just come down to time and, I mean, kind of like investing, right? I guess it comes down to
yeah.
time and like just continually doing your thing. Sometimes I think I'm crazy for still going with this. I started like a little over 2 years ago now.
Wow, we started at similar times.
Similar
I think
times, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, it was the first year was, at least for me, was pretty tough. Like early on, I would make a video, I'd get like 10 views, maybe no comments, and I'd be like, do I really want to keep going with this? But I started, talking to some people, and then once I started to get to know some viewers and commenters and like chat back and forth, I'm like, okay, now this is more fun and it's kind of worth it. And I kind of figured, okay, if the video is watched for a longer period of time than it took me to make, then maybe it's worth it. So now I think we're well past that, luckily, although, I'm still very small in the grand scheme of things, but it's fun.
I think, as you said, it's just like investing, because I experience, when there is hype about something and because I think YouTube, it's maybe weird to say, it has less to do with talent and like I think it has more to do with niche and you being able to give value to the audience, right?
Sure.
And I think that you're doing very good with the channel, but the Rocket Lab audience currently is very, very small,
Yeah,
right?
that's what
So
I don't know how far I can really go with it. That's another thing. But it's interesting. I know I'm kind of getting off topic of where I used to, or I was originally planning to go with this conversation, but it's interesting. But yeah, whenever I make a Tesla video or a non-space industry video, because originally it was just going to be an investing channel. It was not even planned to be anything related to space. But that's where my audience is, and so eventually, and I've always been interested in space, so it's kind of worked out. But yeah, still, if I make any other Tesla video or anything like that, unfortunately the views are very low and it doesn't do very well. So
I experienced the same exact thing. Like my channel was 100% focused on Palantir before, and I thought that it was lucky because it was a stock that I liked, and it almost had this I mean, not this Elon Musk effect, but to a very small degree. Like if you mentioned Palantir, you were getting a lot of views.
Yeah, it seems to be very big. Like, I mean, right now it's done well, so it's probably having like a even more popularity.
But at the time when I was starting the channel, it was like on the way down, And I think that it was like a very nice place to start because it was like quite fast to get views on the videos and like really feel how it's going. And then when I started making Rocket Lab videos, they were like 10 out of 10, and for quite some time, and lately it turned. So now when I make a Palantir video, it's like 7 out of 10 on the channel, and the Rocket Lab videos are the ones that are doing quite well.
So does that feel good for you, or are you kind of sad that the Palantir ones are underperforming the Rocket Lab?
Look, it's really weird because as a content creator, like I wanna, like I hate making videos for making videos' sake, right? I am trying to make videos every day because I think that you kind of need that to succeed on YouTube. And there is some days when so much things happens that I could do like 3 videos in a day, and I can't do it because I only have time for 1. But then, for example, I forgot about our interview today. And I was like in the evening thinking like, what should I make a video about? And I'm like, there hasn't happened anything with Rocket Lab. Palantir is very quiet. And I was like, oh my God, going into this. And then you wrote me like, are we still on? And I was like, yes, I love these, speaking interviews. And so back to this point that like, I feel that Palantir is like my content was very needed when the stock was going down and it was $6 and very few people knew about the stock, And then when it blew up, I don't know, it's a really weird feeling that you're not so useful as a content creator because what are you talking about? That it's still going good. It's still, and it's also that when the stock really really runs and it starts to be overvalued, like you still hold it, but you wouldn't recommend for people to buy it, right? And
it reminds me of Tesla a little back when it was at the highs. Like, I loved the company, but I was like, I couldn't tell anyone to buy at those levels. So
I also remember that when you had these like crazy Tesla bulls who had YouTube channels built around Tesla, and many of, I think it was only Steve and Mark Ryan who didn't say the stock is overvalued, and he was still buying. And Jeremy, who else was big? Hyperchange. I think he was even selling at $400.
I don't remember Galley saying he was selling, but I do remember him saying, I think it's kind of overvalued right now. So it could be. Yeah. It's tough. I've always wondered what will happen in my channel if I feel like Rocket Lab goes to the moon and it starts to feel like, fairly valued or overvalued. Or if I ever wanted to sell it, that would be an interesting experience. But you kind of went through that when you sold Tesla, I guess, right?
Yeah. I got a lot of hate. It's funny because you have like people who are very understanding. And like, I don't know what it is when, so some, I think a bigger percentage of the people understand what you're doing and they're happy with that you have your own opinion and you have your own trading style, and they just maybe say, I disagree with your decision, but whatever. And then there's a very small, very loud percentage that thinks like you killed their mother or something when
Yeah.
you sell a stock. And then they really come after you. And I actually also sold in the portfolio that was with my real estate company. I had to sell Palantir because we came into a situation and like actually the money was needed in the company. Like it had
Sure.
nothing to do with Palantir. And I made it very clear that I'm selling this one portfolio. The other portfolio is still like 90% of Palantir. The selling has nothing to do with Palantir. Like we got into an emergency and the money is needed. And I still got so much hate. And there is still some of those people who, like, I have to explain, like, when you sell, they automatically think like you're 100% sold, you're like a bear. And I still get comments on this, like, yeah, you're a long-term investor, but you trimmed your Palantir position. And it's
Right.
like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting if that ever happens to me. I don't feel like I have the thickest skin. Like I get 10 comments that are positive and obviously they're very nice, but then I get the one that's negative and I'm like, "Oh, I'll be thinking about it for the next 3 days." But luckily I think as your channel gets bigger, you get more of that negativity. So,
yeah,
um sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that you get pretty used to it. Like maybe in the beginning, I also reacted more to it, but now I don't know. It doesn't faze me at all when I see negative comments.
No, that's good. So why don't we talk a little bit about Rocket Lab now? Because I'm sure that's what most of our audience is interested in.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell? I know you've mentioned it a little bit for me, but just tell us about how you found them and what kind of drew you to the company, and how long it took you to research and before you finally ended up buying your shares.
Yeah. So it's a quite funny story, actually. I heard about Rocket Lab because I was so much into SpaceX in 2016, 17, 18. I was like watching every rocket launch that I could. And then I knew about that company, but my view was like, they're going to go bankrupt. Why are they even trying? Like, just give all the money to SpaceX. And then a few months ago, I decided to maybe start writing articles for Seeking Alpha.
Sure.
And because I was thinking like I want to expose myself to new stocks, I want to practice like how you value stocks, and I heard that they like pay money for articles, and then I was like, it can be this perfect mix match. And I saw like a list where they wrote like we pay extra money for undercovered stocks, and the first stock that was there that they pay extra money to was Rocket Lab.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And I was like, Rocket Lab, how is this company still alive? Okay, I'm going to write this bearish article, it's going to be like a very easy. And then I literally started researching the company. And every time I was like, okay, when are they going bankrupt? How are they still alive? Who even thinks it's a good idea to go up against SpaceX?
Right.
And from that, doing the research on the company, I turned into like an Uber bull. Like I was completely surprised.
Yeah. So you were planning to write a bearish article.
Yeah.
Did the article get published?
No, I submitted it and then it was not approved by their standards, and then I haven't done the corrections. But I want to,
Okay.
I want to write on Seeking Alpha, but it's not like on my top priority list.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're busy with the real estate, YouTube, all the rest, and you have a daughter and everything, so it's hard to find the time for sure.
Yeah.
But I assume it did turn into a bullish article.
Definitely.
Okay. So was there like one specific aspect of the company you liked, or was it the management or a certain product or anything in particular, or just kind of the whole story?
I mean, what really closed me 100% on Rocket Lab was actually this book, Ashley Vance, When the Heavens Went to Sail. And like, because like in my universe, space is the future. Like I cannot see a future where there will be less space exploration, there will be less satellites, and it just, yeah, I cannot see that happen, right? So, and then when I read this book and I saw like what Peter Beck already went through, like it feels like he has already climbed the Mount Everest without food, without guidance, and
Yeah, he has been through so much. Yeah, I do recommend the book as well, by the way. some crazy stuff in there.
And then you go like, okay, so he has climbed the Mount Everest, and now he's like just coming down on the other side of the mountain, and you're like, this cannot basically fail. Like with such a good leader and with everything that he has done, it feels like it's a downhill from what he has already accomplished. And
I remember them saying he developed Electron for something like $25 million. That's nothing for a rocket company. It's crazy. It's like, I don't know how you do that. And even Neutron's super cheap. I was looking recently, comparing the numbers of how much it cost to develop Falcon 9. And if they really do get Neutron to the pad for $250 million, that is quite a feat as well, I will say. So.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when you look at the other space companies, because I think that Rocket Lab is historically the least well-funded. Because
they are,
yeah. Because if you look at like SpaceX, it started with Musk's wealth. Then you have what do you call it? Blue Origin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's so funny because it's almost like a sickness on the company. Like Blue Origin has, I'm probably gonna say some stupid number, but I think like 7,000 employees.
Yeah, I think it was actually higher than that, but it's a ton. Yeah.
And then they haven't sent anything to orbit yet. And you go like, what do those people do? And it's not even like 7,000 cleaners. It's like 7,000 space engineers that probably all of them have 6-figure plus salaries and bonuses. And
I mean, it's wild. I do think there's something to that, and you can't necessarily just throw more and more money at a problem and expect it to be solved quicker. And maybe that's just kind of a culture that's been built over at Blue. Like they do have, I don't know. I don't want to defend them, but they do have some other projects they're talking about and working on and stuff, like Orbital Reef or their New Shepard, which like I don't personally see New Shepard ever really being moving the needle profitability wise. And how do you feel about the space tourism side of things, by the way? So you have New Shepard with Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, obviously, with their Spaceship 2, I believe it's called now. Are you interested in that space at all, or?
I mean, to be honest, I don't see the market there. I kind of agree with Peter Beck that on space tourism there is like one big customer, which is NASA, and then there is a few very rich people who want to go to space. But I don't see that market exploding like the satellite market, and maybe it's coming later down the line. Maybe if there is like space hotels and space destinations that people can visit, maybe it will be a much bigger market. But for now, I just don't see this exponential growth.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly hasn't been there with Virgin Galactic. I just made a video about them recently, and I don't see the profitability there either, to be honest. So I was just curious. But yeah, so Blue might even have too much money, I guess. And do you think Rocket Lab not having enough money in the early days has kind of benefited them in the long run?
I would tend to think that, because it's like, if you look at, for example, another company that is really, really well capitalized is Relativity Space. Mm-hmm. And I feel that it's a similar, I did a video recently how serious of a competitor they are to Rocket Lab. And they also have not sent anything to orbit yet. They had an almost successful launch on their first try on a rocket.
To be fair to them, for a first launch, I do think it went pretty well. I mean, it's true they haven't made it to orbit, yes.
But you know who did amazing on the first launch? Rocket Lab.
Yes, they did as well. Yeah.
They have done the best out of all the because basically their first launch was a success. Had it not been for the FAA guys who lost some. Yeah.
Triggered the FTS or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That Peter Beck must have been so frustrated at that moment.
Yeah, but I agree. But so Relativity, I think they have like their own space launch complex that they rent. They have like they have almost as many employees as Rocket Lab. And again, like Rocket Lab has put 170 satellites in orbit. They're developing the Neutron. They have the satellite manufacturing arm, and then you have Relativity, which is only a launch provider with as many employees as Rocket Lab for, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question for you, because when I was thinking about Relativity, beyond all the other things, I was just thinking, like, I don't know if I could invest in a pure launcher. And like even SpaceX is not even a pure launcher anymore, right? Because Starlink is the majority of the valuation now. But would you invest in someone who's only doing launch?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the first. So when I looked into writing this article for Seeking Alpha, and I discovered that they're not just a launch provider, and they have, the space services, which is much more reliable income, and that they have this purpose of having Rocket Lab logo on everything. That was the one that first made me very bullish, because a launch provider is a very lumpy business. I think in the future, it's so weird, because the launch, I think, is going to be like a race to the bottom of, like who can launch for almost the least profit, because there's so much money to be made on the satellites and on the space services after.
Right.
Yeah. But without, it's like such a huge moat, because there is so few companies that can launch things into orbit. And I think that after maybe 10 years from now, it will be insanely hard for new companies to make rockets, because it will just not make sense to risk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's only, like, if you're developing a new rocket is so expensive, it's already been driven down so much, the cost. It's kind of hard to come in and disrupt what is already like a pretty cheap industry now. So yeah, I think so. So yeah, any other players in the space industry that you think would be of concern to Rocket Lab? Is it just SpaceX? Relativity you're not too worried about?
How do you call it? On Relativity, what I am worried about is that if they cut down, because they're so well funded, right? So they can sell a lot of launches at a loss. And obviously, if I thought about it a lot, about what is it Ellis? Tim Ellis, right? That's the CEO of
Tim Ellis. Sorry, you cut out a little bit there, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought a lot about what Tim Ellis has said, that 100% of the contracts where they were up against the Neutron, they won, right?
Right. Well, he said actually 100% of all the contracts they've gone after, they've won. So theoretically, like even a bunch, that Neutron wasn't in, but yeah.
Yeah, and I thought a lot about what that means, right? And I was thinking, if I'm a company who wants to launch satellites and I go to SpaceX, and SpaceX is like, look, we have so much to do, it's 63 million, take it or leave it, right? Then you go to Peter Beck, who says, look, we are 55 million and we are only taking serious contracts, and GYF, like Elon Musk, or take right. our yeah. And then you go to this company who's developing a rocket, and then they're like, look, we'll take you for 30 million, and you sign this contract, but if we cannot deliver the rocket, then you're free to choose someone else, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's my risk? Because like you can only win on this contract, because if they deliver, you had a launch that you would have paid 55 or 63 million for. And if they don't deliver, then you can still just hop on over to the Neutron and buy their 55 million, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, with this setup, of course they're winning 100% of the contracts. And this is when it comes into play, like how much money are they willing to burn? Are they going to go into making their own satellites, or do they have another plan on monetizing the business? And I think they can be a pain in the butt for quite some time.
But that's mainly, it's not because they're out competing, it's more just because they have so much cash and they're willing to sign these contracts for so low value in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy said that he's like, we're not discounting to get contracts, and we are of course adjusting our prices, and the prices now are 50% higher than they were. And I'm like, what was the price that they started at? Because they're even beating. So let's say they started at, no, what is it? If they started at,
Yeah, I guess if they're still beating Neutron now and it's 50% higher now than it was.
yeah, so then
Like,
they started at what, $30 million, and now they went up to $45 million, and it's still cheaper than,
maybe.
and
Yeah.
and then you look at on this rocket, like how much money they have invested in. I think, what was it? I think the number was like 500 million or something. And you have to earn that money back, right? On your rockets. And then I have such a hard time to see that on the 30. I mean, for sure they lose money on the 30 million, but let's say on the 45 million, you still have to somehow earn back your original investment on the rocket. And
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe, maybe eventually they'll announce their own constellation or something down the line. But for now, it's just launch that has to do it. So anyway, at least I think they've had the benefit of being private, and we've seen why maybe it's a good idea not to go public versus like an Astra where, they're not launching until 2026 for their new rocket. And, they seem to have the time and be able to raise funds on the private markets where the public markets have not been very kind lately. So
yeah, that's actually something that I thought about, which is a potential risk for Rocket Lab. I also did a video about this, that like if you look at this, for example, that Relativity has a 4.2 billion valuation, and they're only a launch provider, and they haven't launched anything yet. And I'm like, how does it make sense that then Rocket Lab is 2 billion with 66% of the income coming from space services, which would, if you would divide up their market cap, that 66% is
different.
Yeah,
Right.
then the rocket launch service is like 600 million worth, and then you take this other company that hasn't launched anything, and they're 4.2 billion. And where I see it would be better if Rocket Lab was private is that if they find a business model for this constellation, for the space infrastructure. Like I looked at, Starlink was $10 billion invested before it became cash flow positive. Wow. The Amazon Kuiper is between 5 to 10 billion. That's what the news article said, but they made a 10 billion launch contract. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
they're spending like that much on launch alone. So
yeah.
yeah, that's
So
yeah. I do
and
kind of think Rocket Lab's constellation will have to be something that can be, profitable at a smaller scale than those
yeah.
two.
Yeah, and I was like, what if they come on to a fantastic business model, but they need like $2 billion? And if your market cap is $2 billion, like how the hell are you going to
Yeah, you
raise?
can't. Yeah,
Yeah, and if they were on the private market, they could just make a nice presentation. They could, take the investors out on a steak dinner and say like, this is the new vision. Yeah, they would be like, this is the new vision for the company, and with
yeah.
this
New
new
funding
vision,
round.
we're valued at 20 billion, and please give us 2 billion, and it would be a 10% dilution to the investors. So I do feel that that's kind of a risk for Rocket Lab. On I am suspecting that they will need extra financing. I think that the best case scenario is that for this space infrastructure, that's the best case for me, right? If it could be that they run out of money and Neutron is not developed yet, that would really suck. But my point is, I would be, how do you call it? It's almost like the stock price going higher would make more security that this company can fund its future growth, which would even make the stock price even go higher.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've talked about that before, where sometimes the stock price is like a self-fulfilling prophecy both ways. Because when it goes up, you can just raise capital and kind of spend your way to whatever you need to do. When it goes down, you can't raise capital, and that causes it to go lower because now investors are even more concerned, and it's It's tough. So yeah, I mean, I hope Rocket Lab goes up. It seems like we've kind of got a stable base here around $4 per share. I think best case scenario might be like the current funds they have is enough to get Neutron going. And by then, perhaps Space Systems plus Electron is kind of bringing in enough revenue to like keep building up Neutron. So they could, have a potential business for themselves. And then if they, have this idea for a space constellation, go back to investors then and say like, look, we've been profitable for several quarters or a year, and then raise money maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I do think, capital raise could be needed down the line as well.
Or if they could take a loan, because that's the other thing that would basically circumvent the market cap is if they can somehow prove that we have enough cash flow to pay back a loan, or it would be a convertible loan or something like this. That would be.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean, they do have that 100 million loan, but if they demonstrate they're profitable, then I think they could probably get another loan. And if you believe the share price deserves to be higher, then you'd probably rather have them take out a loan than be diluted yourself. So it could be a good option.
I'm curious, what do you think is the fair value of Rocket Lab now?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think on my spreadsheet, like I did a few different models, and I felt like conservatively it should be like at least 6 or 7. And I know some viewers are probably wincing right now because they've been around since it went public at 10, and they're like, "You're telling me today it's worth 6 or 7?" It's tough when it's not profitable. It's tough to make the projections. So I try to play it safe with that. What do you think the fair value is today?
Yeah, I also did several models, and it's between $6 to $8. But I think that you really like I really like how Peter Beck is how do you call it, like how he's not promising. I think he's handling the questions by analysts very, very well, but at the same time he's like zero pumping the stock.
That's true. He's the opposite of a hype man. He's like the opposite of a Chris Kemp, who was the Astra CEO, and he was like in many ways the hype man, I think. But
yeah, and I almost feel that they would need someone like that at the company, because if there was just more data about certain things that the analysts could write down in their tables, like for example the space systems side of Rocket Lab. Like it's impossible. It's 66% of the company, so they're more of a space systems company than a rocket launch company, and it's like impossible to find a projection of how that side of the business they think is going to do. And why? Like I feel that puts such an uncertainty. And how do analysts and investors handle uncertainty? Is you ask for a lower price, because that's what gives you security, right?
Yeah, I agree. I would love guidance going further out. So every quarter we get the guidance for the next quarter, and then we at least got the launch numbers for next year. But on space systems, it's just like we seem to be going quarter by quarter, and it's very hard to figure out, what the trajectory is, what they're thinking. So
yeah, and
by the way, anyone out there who has like any ideas or data on the growth trajectory of space systems based on comments, feel free to let me know. Yeah,
I've also had some guys on interviews, and also on SpaceX, and whenever I get to interview a new guy about Rocket Lab, I'm always like, what is your projection for space systems, and where did you get that number? And no one could answer that question yet.
Have you talked to that many other Rocket Lab investors?
I mean, it's you, Matt, what's his name, Nico Bierkoltz.
Oh yeah, I wanted to watch that one. I like his tweets, but I didn't watch that video yet. So
yeah, it was pretty cool to have him on. And Rocket Lab Plab, I spoke to.
Oh, did you?
Also, I mean, not on on private messages. I want to have him. I want to have him on the channel, but he has not said yes yet.
Okay.
Or yeah, whatever. So I think it will happen at one point. He's very welcome on the channel. But yeah, like when they're not, and okay, so tinfoil hats. Like, why do you think that can be? And my guess is either the numbers are not good, so they want to keep it a secret, so that we use our own fantasy, or they themselves have a very hard like, let's say that they have some very big contracts that they're negotiating on, because I was thinking, what if they get a customer who says, we want a mega constellation, build 3,000 satellites, and you have 3 years to do it, and it's like a 5 billion contract.
Yeah.
And let's say that they're negotiating on this contract, right? Like, how do you, because if you say something, the stock like 5x's, and then if it doesn't happen, you get sued, and then yeah.
It's tough. I mean, the last earnings call, they even had that little mystery Constellation customer with like, well, yeah, we have this deal where they're using all Rocket Lab parts, and they went through like, reaction wheels and star trackers and radio, I believe, and all the rest. And then we're just like, okay, we have no details on how big this contract is, like how many spacecraft, when it will be delivered, or anything. But I think Peter is kind of afraid of being wrong. So he has this big philosophy of like doing what you say you will do. They did have some SPAC projections in terms of like Electron launch rates. They didn't end up hitting for various reasons, including the pandemic. But I think after that, he's very much like, okay, I don't want to say anything where I might not actually succeed in doing it. But sometimes a little hype is good. You're right.
Yeah, because
it's a fine line, though.
Yeah, you did this video with Chamath and Richard Branson on Virgin Orbit. It is, right?
Virgin Galactic. Although Richard Branson did do Virgin Orbit and spin it off, but it went bankrupt. Yeah, it was a competitor to Electron, by the way. But I think that was probably before you started following Rocket Lab.
Yeah, it was. But because such a fine line, I even wrote to you in a comment that as being involved in a sort of a startup, like, I understand that you cannot get investors if you don't have big targets. Like, you cannot go to the investor and say like, yeah, we're gonna, like, for example, in my real estate company, like, you invest and maybe we pay you back. Like, no investor will. It's like, you have to go like, this is the project, these are the numbers, and the projection is that real estate, you will be earning between 13 to 14% per year, right? And sometimes we hit that, sometimes we don't hit that, But I think that all the intelligent investors understand this. But the point is, if I would make a projection that is like, you're going to make 30%, and I pull the numbers out of my butt, it would be actually fraud.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, how do you prove that? Because, like, I feel that when you show the video, I think that the shareholder lawsuit will have a very hard time to prove that they intentionally misled people. But the difference is so freaking big. Like, how do you go out and say that we're going to have 70% gross margin, and it's going to be like software like margins, and we have
that vehicle
so
can't make money. Like, they've admitted the vehicle, they're winding it down and going with a new Delta because like it literally is, they can't make money off of it. So yeah.
But do you see, like, this kind of thing happens because, for example, to give you an example, Relativity said that they have like their Terran 1 rocket, the first one, is it called Terran 1? Yeah, like, they said that it was the most pre-sold rocket of that size when they launched the rocket, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, they launched it, and 2 months later they're like, never mind, we're quitting this concept, and we're and for example, they didn't get sued for that, and that was like,
well, they did for sure have some Terran 1 contracts, but they did just fully cancel it, which caught me off guard, caught a lot of people off guard.
I mean, it must have been that.
But I think we both agree. Sorry to interrupt. Like, I think what we're saying is like Rocket Lab and Peter Beck should play the game a little bit more. in
Yeah,
terms of,
exactly, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Because I think that it's yeah, like you, yeah, or Musk is also a good example when he says that
Oh, he's always
FSD is,
late.
yeah, and you have to get people excited, you have to get them on board, and what Musk always says, that look, we're doing something that has never been done before, and we don't fully know what's on the way, right? So how do you
Yeah.
predict? So I have full understanding for that, but when the difference become as big as it was in Chamath and Richard Branson's case, it does, like, it's not a good look. But everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But yeah.
Yeah. I think partly also, I haven't actually met any New Zealanders in person, but I think they have this kind of humble Kiwi culture mentality, so that may also play into it as well. But yeah, it's also what I like about the company in some scenarios, because they never seem to miss their estimates. So there's good and bad, but yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I mean, now that we're buying the stocks, it's fantastic. Like, we are
right.
buying at bottom basement prices. And then if we ever want the stock to go up, I do believe that they will have to, yeah, or maybe they're banking on their success is being so undeniable that people have to. I mean,
That
let's
might be
put it
what it.
this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's put it this way. If Neutron flies and they bring it to the pad, and that flight is successful, the Ford, and they announce some contracts, this $4 share price makes 0 cents. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
Agreed. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what would you say? Do you think is the biggest risks for the company and the stock right now?
It's such a good question, and I've been thinking about this a lot because, like, how do you say it? Like, I invested into Palantir, and that stock turned out to be a fantastic investment, and I would like to
Took a
say
little
it's,
while though.
yeah, and I would like to say it's because I'm a genius. But the thing is, like, I had no way of knowing that ChatGPT was going to come out and bring in this AI craze, and it was not in. So I would say that I got lucky. And if I look at where I had failed investments, or for example, my real estate company now is, like, we are having a very rough time, and every project we are doing risk evaluations, and what can be the risk, and we are having a tough time for something that wasn't even on our, like, we didn't have on our risk analysis that there was going to be a war in Europe between
Sure. Yeah.
Ukraine and Russia. We didn't have that the national bank is going to increase the interest rates the fastest rate they have done in, like, I don't know since when. In Sweden, the Swedish money, like, I guess you're not familiar with the situation in Europe, but the war broke out, and then you have countries that are with the euro, like they are in the eurozone, and then you
Yeah.
have, like, small nations that held out. And for some reason, it seems to me that the nations that are not in the eurozone, like, their currencies got super like, it crashed basically, because I think that people thought that the eurozone is so many countries involved, and that's like a safe currency, and then they basically exited the like the Swedish krona or the Norwegian krona, or the I actually don't know if the Polish money went down, but I know that the Hungarian money went like 30-40% down. And that means that, for example, the Swedish money, I think, is 30% down compared to the euro since the war started. And what's crazy about that is, we buy the food from outside, so we have to pay in euros when you buy the food. So that, like, builds in like a 30% inflation without anything
Right.
and we buy a lot of building materials from outside. So yeah. And my point is that none of these things were on the risk assessment. And I want to say that if Rocket Lab ends up being a bad investment, I'm willing to bet that it will be for a reason that we didn't think of and we didn't foresee.
I mean, I am a little curious though, so this past week we've had a few things happen, right? We've had Amazon hire SpaceX, something that I don't think anyone expected to happen for launch. We had Tim Ellis come out and say that they did compete against Neutron and win. So, are you at all discouraged over some of these recent news items? And there's some rumors around the Archimedes engine for Neutron being a little bit behind, but I mean nothing is confirmed on that front. But yeah, how do you feel about some of these things? Does it discourage you at all?
No, not discourage me. Like my biggest fear with Rocket Lab is that we run out of money before the Neutron flies, and the stock price is as low or lower than it is now, because then it makes it that they cannot raise money, and they have to somehow get money into the company from really a position of weakness.
Yeah.
That's my biggest worry. On Amazon buying from SpaceX, I'm somehow pretty sure that once the Neutron is available, like they didn't go all in on SpaceX. Like I feel that they were being sued by shareholders, and then they had to show like, okay, fine, like we give them a bone, and
It could be, yeah. It was just 3 launches, so
yeah. And on this Tim Ellis, I'm suspecting that they will miss the 2026 launch date for their vehicle, and then Neutron will just get a lot of customers. And I also think that there is going to be a lot of increasing demand for satellite constellations. So I'm not so worried about this.
Oh, okay.
This
So I saw a recent, I think you titled a recent video like, "Is Neutron unsellable?" or something like that. So I was curious if you were concerned, but I guess not really. You think there's plenty of demand?
Yeah, I was going into this that Tim Ellis is probably completely underbidding, and of course the companies take that because it's zero risk for them. And
Sure.
and if they just budget that, okay, it will cost us 63 million on SpaceX Falcon 9, that's our worst case scenario, and maybe we can get it for 30 million. But if the company doesn't deliver, we can, and Neutron is not out, then it's SpaceX. If Neutron is out, then it's Neutron,
Yeah. So what are you excited about then, since I've asked about the risks for like the next year or two? Obviously, I think we're all excited about Neutron eventually launching, but anything else you're looking forward to with the company?
Yeah, a lot. I'm very excited about the next launch. It will be the first. It will be the first like live launch that I watch from Rocket Lab, and so interesting. Like when you're a shareholder,
Yeah.
it's because I think that a rocket launch is emotional, like to begin with, and now I'm like, if this rocket blows up, our share.
Yeah, your shares could be worth like 20% less tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
It's a little added stress, a little excitement though. It's fun.
Yeah. But also like, okay, if it goes well, like we actually start a period. I think Nico Birkolz tweeted out that this launch marks the start of a cadence where it's like every 17 days on average, there is going to be a launch. And that's really amazing. And
yeah.
Q1 is looking like it's going to be the first quarter that is over 100 million in revenue. And that is, I think it's almost 100% up from Q1 last year.
I'd have to double check that one, but it could be. Yeah.
I'm actually going to look, but the point is, it's a crazy.
Yeah, amazing growth for sure. When I saw that number, I was like, "Holy crap!" I was not thinking, Q1 would have that kind of a revenue number.
Yeah, me too. And again, I don't see how the stock price manages to stay this low if we have such a good quarter.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not. Or was it? Oh yeah, I have it here. So Q1 2023 is 54.9 million, 55 million.
So almost a double, yeah.
Yeah.
Very close. And if they beat that number, I suppose it's possible they beat that 100 million. It could end up being a full double, 100% growth. So
yeah. And then I'm very excited about any news on Neutron. I think, as you mentioned, it smells like, or you can feel it in the air, that there will be a delay. But even if there is a delay, there's a difference. Not all delays are created equal. So if they say
Sure.
that it's not Q4 2024 but Q1 2025, I can completely live with that. It would very much suck if they would say like, no, Neutron has to be put to 2026.
Yeah,
Don't
that
expect
would
that.
be difficult. I
Yeah.
mean, it would all depend on, I guess, the spending on Neutron. Because, Peter said previously, if they're not spending on Neutron, they're pretty much a profitable company today. So I do think there's also something to be said for their first profitable quarter. Will have a really good result on the stock. Like I've seen a few companies, once they get profitable, it's like the stock's like, okay, we're good now. So yeah, that might help. But when do you expect profitability for the company?
Actually, I haven't looked at it yet. And it's funny. I was just thinking now, like, wouldn't they be profitable on the 100 million income? But I guess it depends on how much they're spending on Neutron.
Yeah, like I think spending continues to grow as they push towards launch. It's just their other lines of business are also growing to kind of offset that, is what I heard. So they kind of think in terms of cash burn, it should be pretty steady, but
Yeah.
anything's
I,
possible.
but okay, let's say I think logically, if Neutron is developed and they have customers, and let's say Neutron comes in Q4 2024, I think some quarter in 2025 they should be profitable.
Sounds pretty fair to me. Yeah. Okay, so here's a difficult question for you then, and I know it's like impossible to be accurate, but if you have to guess, where do you see the stock price like 5 years from now today?
Oh, 5 years from now, that's like 2029. I would have to answer like Kathy Wood, that I have like this Monte Carlo,
Oh yeah, you
which is like a probability of
right.
so, and it's also kind of what I think makes it an attractive investment, because barring that the company doesn't do some major F up, I cannot see that the stock price is not more than what it is, right? But it's like a bell curve. So it's like a very low probability that it's like $8 or $9. I think in 5 years, I would say the highest probability for me is between $15 to $20. And I think that the space infrastructure, if they communicate it correctly, they hype it correctly, they can fund it correctly. I think it can add tens of billions to the valuation of Rocket Lab.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think
And
so? Here's the question: do you think they, in 5 years, are owning and operating at least one satellite themselves that is in orbit?
yeah, that's the one. It's like a call option on the company, right?
Right.
I don't know if I have a feeling that they themselves don't know, and they are focusing on having rockets available and being able to build satellites. And I think that once a good enough business opportunity presents itself, then they will full blast go after it. That's kind of what I get from Peter Beck. It's not that they're sitting on something and
Yeah.
they're not doing it for lack of financing or something. It's that I guess they don't feel like the world needs a fourth like an internet mega constellation. Because
Well, I mean, as we said as well, like they don't think they really have the funds to build a constellation like a Kuiper or a
yeah,
Starlink. But yeah, I guess if Neutron is not launching, then none of that really matters. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
is obviously going to be the top priority for them.
yeah. Because think about it, on the internet, you have Starlink, you have Kuiper, you have OneWeb. That's 3 customers. So Rocket Lab would be like the 4th one. And I don't know. It's very hard to make a business sense of spending 10 to 20 billion to come up with a And the internet mega constellation is like you have to have enough satellites for it to work. So it's not even
you can't just
you
launch
cannot,
one.
yeah. And then you can have this Earth imaging, but that's also being done by 3-4 other companies, and I don't I don't see how you can compete in that. And yeah, I think it's like some space manufacturing, and some other thing that is not thought of yet.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I kind of like the idea of communications just because, like, down mass is when it's space manufacturing, you've got to actually send up the stuff to manufacture and send back down. It doesn't seem like it's as recurring with, like, once the satellite's up there for a communication satellite, it's just going to do its thing for 5-10 years. But like if you have a space factory, you got to keep shipping up the pharmaceutical chemicals or whatever you're doing. But it's possible. I mean, they've dipped their toe in, I guess, with this Varda capsule and stuff.
Yeah. I was thinking that maybe they can, like if we are going to have a moon base, then maybe they will do like a constellation around the moon, which would, because like Earth to communicate with the moon, because as far as I understand, it's very hard to communicate when like with the
if you're on the far side of the moon or something like that. Yeah, there is a company called Intuitive Machines that actually went public maybe a year ago. They're kind of thinking about something similar. They don't have a rocket either. They also, they followed what I consider to be the traditional SPAC path where they shot up and now they're like way down. So they're having trouble right now, but they're looking to send their first lunar lander to the moon in January, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. But this lunar economy could also be big when Artemis really starts going.
Yeah, because it feels like, SpaceX has their 100% attention on Mars. And I think that, for example, a lunar constellation, it would be too small a potato for them to go after,
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but we don't know what that is going to be. All I know is that if it's a really profitable thing, then it will add tens of billions to the valuation of Rocket Lab, and that Rocket Lab is going to be nothing like the one that we know today.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Okay, so unfortunately, I'm kind of running out of time here. I would love to continue this conversation, but maybe next time. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the viewers, or any other thoughts you have about Rocket Lab, or even any other companies you think you're interested in?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I'm kind of happy with my position in Rocket Lab right now. But I don't have a next company that I'm following. And I don't know, I don't feel this manic urge to like, I have to build position in companies. So I kind of feel like the opportunity can come to me and I will find the next stock when it's the right time, I guess.
Sorry to interrupt. I just kind of find like what you said is so true. Like if you have money you're itching to deploy, that's when you make a mistake. Whereas if you're like, feel like, okay, I'll wait till the next opportunity comes around, then sometimes it's just so obvious that it really works out for you.
Yeah. And I really love the Rocket Lab community, and I think that because the stock price is very low, this is the most important time for us creators. And what is so sad for me is that there is a few very special people that follow us and invest with us, and hopefully we're going to make a lot of money. And as the stock moons, we're going to have like I think the channels will 5x 6x because it becomes a FOMO,
right. Yeah.
But then it's kind of too late for those people, so I think that we have a very special group. And I was, and I think I still am kind of a prominent creator in the Palantir area, but I don't focus so much on it. And that group was very analytical, like some of the smartest people that I know, like online. And the Rocket Lab people is more like the most loving, understanding, optimist, very excited group of people. And I'm really happy to be part of this community. It's really, different, and it's really a joy.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people watching. So if you're watching here, Vince said that you're really special and you're in early. So there you go. Okay, thank you so much for coming on, Vince. I enjoyed the discussion. I honestly do have to go. Otherwise, I would have kept this going for like another half hour because I feel like we really could have continued talking about it. But maybe in the next video, if you're up for coming on again.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay, well, to everyone watching and to you, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. See you, Vince. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Ciao,
Right.
ciao.
Bye.